Welcome to Podcast 1 of Docs Talk Teaching. I am your co-host, Dr. Peggy Yates. I am an experienced veteran educator of 25 years, and now I work in higher education training new teachers. Pam?
Hello, Peggy. Thank you for your introduction. I'm Pam George, and I do the same thing as you do. I train future educators, and we're so happy to share our knowledge with all of you.
You know, Pam and I met because we have been assigned to so many state of Michigan committees to work together on different issues in special education and in education. And when we've sat together, we often were asked to sit separate because we would laugh and share stories and want to compare and learn from each other. And we knew it was time for us to come together and begin to share our knowledge and stories and laughter with you. So here we are, Podcast 1, talking about today, special education. Today, we are talking about the IEP, specifically Section 1. Now, we are going to break down the IEP into the 7 sections so that you can better understand what to look for, whether you are a teacher or a parent. Just a short little podcast to determine what are the key points of Section 1 and then subsequent sections that you should look for. Now, I do want to delineate that when we are talking about Michigan law and not other states. So the way that IDEA is written, that's a federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act federal law, and then each state has their own interpretation of what that is. And here in Michigan, that's called the Michigan Administrative Laws for Special Education. So if it looks a little bit different in a state other than Michigan, that is why. But the key points are going to be the same. And so I'm going to start out by talking about dates. The most important thing on page 1, and that is right here, the date of the IEP. The IEP has to be held every 365 days. And so if it's 366 days, somebody's in trouble. Usually that's the special education teacher. I know for me, I would get the red stop sign and I knew that I was overdue and that is definitely out of compliance. So what I would do as a special education teacher is I would have the IEP every 11 months so that I could plan for snow days or fog days or whatever might be happening here in Michigan to make sure that I was not out of compliance. Pam?
So true. Thank you for highlighting that. We really need a calendar because there's another date on the right side. And that could be looking different because it's the reevaluation date. And that reevaluation happens every 3 years. So that's when you reevaluate whether the child needs to continue special education. So it's a little bit different than that annual review. One year I happened to overlook that date and I had to scramble to plan 2 meetings in 1 year.
You know, the way that I used to teach it is annual reeval, annual reeval. So that's the 1, 2, 3. So when you're looking on there and it says reeval, that means that it's time for that testing to happen because it's year 3. And during that time, then the team will decide if an assessment is needed to determine if special education services are still needed. Or potentially the assessment is waived by the team and they say this person's going to qualify, so let's not do that additional testing. Okay, so let's talk for a moment about the birthday of the child. So if that student is going to be 16 in the 365 days of that IEP, then they need to have what's called a transition IEP, because what happens is the school is mandated to provide school to work experiences within that IEP, and there's going to be goals written if that student's going to be, again, 16 within the 365 day of that calendar year. During the timeline of that IEP. So pay attention to that. Otherwise, it's just called an IEP or Individualized Education Program.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. So we highlighted 3 dates, the annual review, the reevaluation, and the birth date. Now you look down and you see an eligibility category. So the eligibility category tells you what category of special education the student qualified for. So for example, in this IEP, the student qualified under the specific learning disabilities, because you see it written over there. And they have 2 qualifying criteria, written expression basic reading skills. And I think on the right, it also says reading comprehension. So this student will have goals possibly in those areas, accommodations, modifications, all that criteria will guide the IEP.
So important, Pam, to know what category of services are going to be rendered, because it determines what specialty the special education teacher may have, what endorsement that they might carry, and what their skill set is.
Yeah.
Okay. So last piece are the people that are coming to the team that need to provide the input for the IEP. So the IEP team means that people come together, that the special ed teacher, the gen ed teacher, the principal, the designated representative, maybe the para educator if there's a one-on-one that is assigned. But in my experience, I have often had to chase the gen ed teacher down to get a signature. And when that happened, what I would have to say is, I have to have you at the meeting. It is the law. Under IDEA, you need to be at the IEP meeting. That is a legal document of what services we are going to provide as a school district. And often I got the answer, I have 30 kids in math class, and I can't spend an hour away from them so that I can plan for one student. And the reality of it is that we have to provide that the gen ed teacher, and not always the gym teacher, but the content area teachers of the services that the student may be having, are providing input on what that student needs, whether that be accommodations or modifications to test, whatever the service is, that input needs to be given.
Thanks for highlighting that. It is a team effort. And I think sometimes maybe the gen ed teacher didn't really value what she could bring to the table. So I just want to talk about, why do these people need to be at the table? The parent, you are the child expert. It's so important to have your voice heard because you are an equal member of the team. And I think about the general education teacher, you are the content expert. And this is also an opportunity for you to learn strategies that will work for a lot of students. And obviously the special education teacher has all the interventions they're going to bring to the table. But one person I want to highlight is that district representation, which is possibly a principal or someone who's got the money. And you don't want to be blindsided at what the IEP team decides, because it's important that you're there because you're the process expert. So the IEP has starred these people because they are mandatory members of the IEP team.
You know, I worked for a district once that had the special education teacher assigned as the designated representative. And I felt like that was out of compliance, because the person that was planning the majority of the services, the special education teacher, was also acting as a designated representative who was responsible for making sure that the services were rendered. So that having that person be the same person is not the best idea. So be careful that the designated representative is actually an administrator in the district who is responsible for the funding of special education, so that they know what services can actually be provided. Okay, so that wraps up podcast 1, section 1, demographics of the IEP. And we so hope that you took away lots of information to help you succeed with special education. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, and see you next time.